The laboratory belonging to Wolfram Schultz, a professor of neuroscience at the University of Cambridge, is not a pretty place. His desk has been alternately described by colleagues as black hole where documents are lost forever and a petri dish where organisms can grow undisturbed and in wild proliferation for years. When Schultz needs to clean something, which is uncommon, he doesn't use sprays or cleansers. He wets a paper towel and wipes hard. If his clothes smell like smoke or cat hair, he doesn't notice or care. However, the experiments that Schultz has conducted over the past 20 years have revolutionized our understanding of how cues, rewards, and habits interact. He has explained why some cues and rewards have more power than others and has provided a scientific roadmap that explains why Pepsodent was a hit, how some dieters and exercise buffs managed to change their habits so quickly, and in the end, what it took to make Febreze sell. In the 1980s, Schultz was part of a group of scientists studying the brains of monkeys as they learned to perform certain tasks, such as pulling on levers or opening clasps. Their goal was to figure out which part of the brain were responsible for new actions. One day, I noticed this thing that is interesting to me, Schultz told me. He was born in Germany and now when he speaks English sounds a bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger, if the Terminator were a member of the Royal Society. A few of the monkeys we watched loved apple juice and the other monkeys loved grape juice, and so I began to wonder, what is going on inside those little monkey heads? Why do different rewards affect the brain in different ways? Schultz began a series of experiments to decipher how rewards work on a neurochemical level. As technology progressed, he gained access in the 1990s to devices similar to those used by the researchers at MIT. Rather than rats, however, Schultz was interested in monkeys like Julio, an 8-pound macaque with hazel eyes who had a very thin electrode inserted into his brain that allowed Schultz to observe neuronal activity as it occurred. One day, Schultz positioned Julio on a chair in a dimly lit room and turned on a computer monitor. Julio's job was to touch a lever whenever colored shapes, small yellow spirals, red squiggles, blue lines appeared on the screen. If Julio touched the lever when a shape appeared, a drop of blackberry juice would run down a tube hanging from the ceiling and onto the monkey's lips. Julio liked blackberry juice. At first, Julio was only mildly interested in what was happening on the screen. He spent most of his time trying to squirm out of the chair. But once the first dose of juice arrived, Julio became very focused on the monitor. As the monkey came to understand through dozens of repetitions that the shapes on the screen were a cue for a routine, touched the lever that resulted in a reward, blackberry juice, he started staring at the screen with a laser-like intensity. He didn't squirm. When a yellow squiggle appeared, he went for the lever. When a blue line flashed, he pounced, and when the juice arrived, Julio would lick his lips contentedly. As Schultz monitored the activity within Julio's brain, he saw a pattern emerge. Whenever Julio received his reward, his brain activity would spike in a manner that suggested he was experiencing happiness. A transcript of that neurological activity shows what it looks like when a monkey's brain says, in a sense, "I got a reward." Schultz took Julio through the same experiment again and again, recording the neurological response each time. Whenever Julio received his juice, the "I got a reward" pattern appeared on the computer attached to the probe in the monkey's head. Gradually, from a neurological perspective, Julio's behavior became a habit. What was most interesting to Schultz, however, was how things changed as the experiment proceeded. As the monkey became more and more practiced at the behavior, as the habit became stronger and stronger, Julio's brain began anticipating the blackberry juice. Schultz's probe started recording the "I got a reward" pattern the instant Julio saw the shapes on the screen before the juice arrived. In other words, the shape on the monitor had become a cue not just for pulling a lever, but also for a pleasure response inside the monkey's brain. Julio started expecting his reward as soon as he saw the yellow spirals and red squiggles. Then, Schultz adjusted the experiment. Previously, Julio had received juice as soon as he touched the lever. Now, sometimes the juice didn't arrive at all, even if Julio performed correctly, or it would arrive after a slight delay. or it would be watered down until it was only half as sweet. When the juice didn't arrive or was late or diluted, Julio would get angry and make unhappy noises or become mopey. And within Julio's brain, Skulls watched a new pattern emerge: craving. When Julio anticipated juice but didn't receive it, a neurological pattern associated with desire and frustration erupted inside his skull. When Julio saw the cue, he started anticipating a juice-fueled joy. But if the juice didn't arrive, the joy became a craving that, if unsatisfied, drove Julio to anger or depression. Researchers in other labs have found similar patterns. Other monkeys were trained to anticipate juice whenever they saw a shape on a screen. Then researchers tried to distract them. They opened the lab doors so the monkeys could go outside and play with their friends. They put food in a corner so the monkeys could eat if they abandoned the experiment. For those monkeys who hadn't developed a strong habit, the distractions worked. They slid out of their chairs, left the room, and never looked back. They hadn't learned to crave the juice. However, once a monkey had developed a habit, once his brain anticipated the reward, the distractions held no allure. The animal would sit there, watching the monitor and pressing the lever over and over again, regardless of the offer of food or the opportunity to go outside. The anticipation and sense of craving was so overwhelming that the monkeys stayed glued to their screens, the same way a gambler will play slots long after he's lost his winnings. This explains why habits are so powerful. They create neurological cravings. Most of the time, these cravings emerge so gradually that we're not really aware they exist, so we're often blind to their influence. But as we associate cues with certain rewards, a subconscious craving emerges in our brains that starts the habit loop spinning. One researcher at Cornell, for instance, found how powerfully food and scent cravings can affect behavior when he noticed how Cinnabon stores were positioned inside shopping malls. Most food sellers locate their kiosks in food courts, but Cinnabon tries to locate their stores away from other food stalls. Why? Because Cinnabon executives want the smell of cinnamon rolls to waft down hallways and around corners uninterrupted, so that shoppers will start subconsciously craving a roll. By the time a consumer turns a corner and sees the Cinnabon store, that craving is a roaring monster inside his head, and he'll reach unthinkingly for his wallet. The habit loop is spinning because a sense of craving has emerged. There's nothing programmed into our brains that makes us see a box of donuts and automatically want a sugary treat, Skulls told me. But once our brain learns that a donut box contains yummy sugar and other carbohydrates, it will start anticipating the sugar high. Our brains will push us towards the box. Then if we don't eat the donut, we'll feel disappointed. To understand this process, consider how Julio's habit emerged. First, he saw a shape on the screen. Over time, Julio learned that the appearance of the shape meant it was time to execute a routine. So he touched the lever. As a result, Julio received a drop of blackberry juice. That's basic learning. The habit only emerges once Julio begins craving the juice when he sees the cue. Once that craving exists, Julio will act automatically. He'll follow the habit. This is how new habits are created, by putting together a cue, a routine, and a reward, and then cultivating a craving that drives the loop. Take for instance smoking. When a smoker sees a cue, say a pack of Marlboros, her brain starts anticipating a hit of nicotine. Just the sight of cigarettes is enough for the brain to crave a nicotine rush. If it doesn't arrive, the craving grows until the smoker reaches unthinkingly for a Marlboro. Or take email. When a computer chimes or a smartphone vibrates with a new message, the brain starts anticipating the momentary distraction that opening an email provides. That expectation, if unsatisfied, can build until a meeting is filled with antsy executives checking their buzzing Blackberries under the table, even if they know it's probably only their latest fantasy football results. On the other hand, if someone disables the buzzing and thus removes the cue, people can work for hours without thinking to check their inboxes. Scientists have studied the brains of alcoholics, smokers, and overeaters and have measured how their neurology, the structures of their brains, and the flow of neurochemicals inside their skulls changes as their cravings become ingrained. Particularly strong habits, wrote two researchers at the University of Michigan, produce addiction like reactions so that wanting evolves into obsessive cravings that can force our brains into autopilot even in the face of strong disincentive, including loss of reputation, job, home, and family. However, these cravings don't have complete authority over us. As the next chapter explains, there are mechanisms that can help us ignore the temptations. But to overpower the habit, we must recognize which craving is driving the behavior. If we are not conscious of the anticipation, then we are like the shoppers who wander as if drawn by an unseen force into Cinnabon. To understand the power of cravings in creating habits, consider how exercise habits emerge. In 2002, researchers at New Mexico State University wanted to understand why people habitually exercise. They studied 266 individuals, most of whom worked out at least 3 times a week. What they found was that many of them had started running or lifting weights almost on a whim, or because they suddenly had free time or wanted to deal with unexpected stresses in their lives. However, the reason they continued why it became a habit was because of a specific reward they started to crave. In one group, 92% of people said they habitually exercised because it made them feel good. They grew to expect and crave the endorphins and other neurochemicals a workout provided. In another group, 67% of people said that working out gave them a sense of accomplishment. They had come to crave a regular sense of triumph from tracking their performances, and that self-reward was enough to make the physical activity into a habit. If you want to start running each morning, it's essential that you choose a simple cue, like always lacing up your sneakers before breakfast or leaving your running clothes next to your bed, and a clear reward, such as a midday treat, a sense of accomplishment from recording your miles, or the endorphin rush you get from a jog. But countless studies have shown that a cue and a reward on their own aren't enough for a new habit to last. Only when your brain starts expecting the reward, craving the endorphins or sense of accomplishment, will it become automatic to lace up your jogging shoes each morning. The cue, in addition to triggering a routine, must also trigger a craving for the reward to come. Let me ask you about a problem I have, I said to Wolfram Schultz, the neuroscientist, after he explained to me how cravings emerges. I have a 2-year-old, and when I'm home feeding him dinner, chicken nuggets and stuff like that, I'll reach over and eat one myself without thinking about it. It's a habit, and now I'm gaining weight. Everybody does that, Skull said. He has 3 children of his own, all adults now. When they were young, he would pick at their dinners unthinkingly. In some ways, he told me, we're like the monkeys. When we see the chicken or fries on the tables, our brains begin anticipating that food, even if we are not hungry. Our brains are craving them. Frankly, I don't even like this kind of food, but suddenly it's hard to fight this urge. And as soon as I eat it, I feel this rush of pleasure as the craving is satisfied. It's humiliating, but that's how habits work. I guess I should be thankful, he said, because the same process has let me create good habits. I work hard because I expect pride from a discovery. I exercise because I expect feeling good afterward. I just wish I could pick and choose better.